If you like your survival horror games with a twist, have I got the game for you. Crisol Theater of Idols is a Resident Evil inspired Spanish flavored survival horror that really drew me in with its unique aesthetic, solid graphics and atmosphere, but also being as unique as it is. Brought me back to the PS2 era when developers tried and made everything. The PS2 era brought us greats, and now in 2026, some of that good old creativity has brought us a solid survival horror experience. And you can tell when playing the game that there is a lot of passion and thought behind it. Crisol is great fun. Now here's why. We step into the boots of warrior for the sun god
Gabriel, my faithful warrior. Dark times are upon us, and I will need your blade once more.
Gabriel on his way to save the town of Tormentosa from the evil that has consumed it and bring back the sun. But like all good adventures, we start washed up on the shore and head off in search of adventures to come. Out of the gate, I really do love this game's atmosphere. Your first impressions of Tormentosa, a very dark, harsh sky with pouring rain, contrasted against the bleak and barely hanging on light, coupled with light Lovecraftian themes and some deep sea horrors. And you get that real sense of isolation and dread from the outset, and it is fantastic stuff. Therefore, after we reach the town proper, our first stop is the cathedral to see what's going on here. But alas, the sinister vibes don't stop with the atmosphere. As we make our way through the town, we come across tons of doll-like bodies. Weird and mangled, but not quite humanoid creatures lying around everywhere. But soon enough, we overhear someone searching for survivors at the cathedral. So we head off to find at least someone to make contact with. Now therefore, after a frantic push through the town to meet up with a potential survivor, we come across carnage and some kind of massacre. So rightfully so, Gabriel pulls out his pistol and moves closer to the cathedral to investigate.
Hello? Angela, you there?
But upon making it to that very cathedral, we find our sole survivor already dead, and we find out what caused all this carnage. Gabriel fights his first statue and loses his weapon, but in a death of sorts, Gabriel goes before the sun god and is granted a blessing.
Gabriel, have you given up already? Is this how far your faith goes?
Turning his blood, his energy into his weapon, and giving his pistol a unique and pretty damn cool appearance, which brings us into this game's unique mechanic. Because your health is also your ammo, you need to balance your damage output with you, also not dying, as it were, really forcing you to weigh up the cost of your shots in each encounter versus how much health you have, making every reload a tactical decision, which takes the limited ammo staple of your genre to a whole new level, which I think is a very cool design choice. But with the blessing in our hands, the first real fight of the game with the statue starting out is very slow, very deliberate. Your pistol unupgraded, and we have some upgrades by the way. Take some time between shots. The pistol isn't all you get starting out, we get the knife. Pretty solid, last ditch weapon, good for opening those yellow crates and the occasional parry. But from combat to an introduction, the mysterious voice on our radio finally introduces herself as Mediodía, a fellow supporter of the sun god stuck on Tormentosa.
Peekaboo! Still alive?
Thanks to the sun.
Ooh, a sun buddy! Looks like we're on the same team! By the way, name's Mediodía.
You.
Fighting against its unspeakable evils. Therefore, after introductions and getting the tools for our success on this journey, it's time to head back to the cathedral via the river, coming across animal bodies as we go, learning how to absorb their life essence. But also another mechanic, your amount of health is finite, so sometimes it's best to juggle if you want to absorb an animal's life force now or come back for them later, after a fight or two, to make best use of the limited resources. Therefore, after getting a solid direction towards the church, finding that our way back is once again blocked, but being a high gate, how do we defeat that? Well, it just so happens that there's a truck nearby that is perfect for the job.
Now. You are the sun.
Therefore, after using the truck to take down the block gate, but with the cathedral in sight, we over the radio meet Padre Arroyo.
Welcome, Captain Escudero. We have been expecting you.
Who are you? Do I know you?
No, not yet. But the sea has told me much about you.
Padre of the sun's rival, the sea, and a very sinister sounding fellow if you ask me. Now therefore, after a little back and forth with Arroyo, we come across the seal holding all the horrors of the island has been broken loose. But before we can stop to think, we meet the horrifically mangled Dolores, some kind of mechanized monster stalking our hero Gabriel in the halls of the cathedral.
I was going to be quick. I'll enjoy watching you suffer.
But from horror to new friends, we meet some of Mediodía's soldiers who save us in the nick of time when we cut to the game's title screen. That, folks, is just the beginning. But after awakening from that little nightmare, we meet Mediodía properly, and she gives us the lay of the land of Tormentosa and the various items we need to get our hands on to seal the villainous forces and save the town. But I gotta say, the Solari base is no joke. They have everything from a carnival game or two to a shooting range and the classic merchant, but in keeping with the game's style, they also have a witch with a crystal ball and crows to keep them company. Exploring the base and its minigame section, I spotted the rewards for the games. Everything from crow totems, kinda like skill points, to cash and permanent health upgrades in the form of special blood vial. Therefore, after taking in the Solari sites, it's off to the Mermaid district as we learn more about the conflict of the sun versus the sea. Upon making it to the Mermaid district, it almost feels like stepping into Atlantis. The place is flooded, kinda spooky, the buildings stand out against the dark and waterlogged areas. Everything is really dark and gloomy. Like before, but with a watery twist. But after we've finally taken the sites, it's time to head for the hub of this area, El Cueño Albino. We need to track down its owner, Elminia Espina, as she also is hiding from the sea people, just like the sun. But in another great nod to the RE series and its love of complicated locking mechanisms, we find the door to Madame Espina's blocked by 3 medallions you need to find and unlock the doors. So I guess it's time to head off and track them down. But with a new environment and new goals comes new enemies. The crossbow statue. They like to do what range enemies do and pop shots at you from range. Not a serious threat, but when you're dealing with other enemies and getting peppered by their shots, the damage can add up pretty quick. Now therefore, we also spot our first of many of this game's collectibles. The witches' crows are being held in cages by the sea folk, so release them and score yourself a discount at the witches' shop. But after exploring the district for a while, looking for the mermaids, we come across the gun shop, La Mar del Trios, and it holds the game's shotgun. Your standard double-barreled boomstick, but locked off from the player by another survival horror icon, the lock chains. And what do we need for those lock chains, you ask? Bolt cutters. Well, with the promise of a boomstick, we head off to the hardware section to find our ticket to boom. But on the way to the hardware store, the game hits me with some back-to-back good combat against now groups of statues, getting us used to dealing with them and their very creepy movements, and the lack of any real alert sound makes them a surprise from time to time. Like, you don't hear them until they're close to you, and sometimes they can be very unexpected, adding the occasional oh shit moment in combat, which is pretty damn fun. But far from power, we'll finally get our hands on the top of the line boomstick, and Dolores is back to make our journey slightly more inconvenient. She starts patrolling the hardware zone, trying to turn us into mincemeat, but unfortunately, we can't damage her yet, so it's time to sneak around her and get what we need done. Now therefore, after finally getting to test our new boomstick, the reload for it is really gnarly, by the way. Gabriel will break it open, and where the shells are supposed to be, needles appear, and he just shoves his hand in there to reload the shotgun. But clearly reloading isn't the most pleasant thing in the world. I mean, the guy's hands by the end of the journey will have been the toughest in all of gaming. But as cool as the shotgun is, reloading it can be very blood expensive. Only use it when you're in the most trouble. Therefore, after escaping Dolores' clutches once again, we make it to the Tableau Zafiro, which leads us to our first potential mermaid and our first puzzle. We need to unlock the doors to the stage in the back rooms by timing the clock on the stage to open when the performers come on stage, granting us various accesses around the restaurant. But this first part got me a little too confident with my resources. I was cruising with blood and vials until the later parts of the area, and then I was really starting to feel the crushing effects of bloodlessness. Now therefore, after a few good spooks and fights with statues among some classy architecture, we come to the first mermaid and her blue medallion. A heart broken for a lover lost in the storm that tore the city apart. But the heartbreak doesn't stop there. That bastard Arroyo murdered the mermaids who were all friends of the Madame Espina we're chasing. But after a good few revelations, it's on to mermaid number 2 at La Perla Accolta. Our old friend Dolores is back again. I was scared of her at first, but you very quickly realize that unless you're caught in the open, she poses almost zero threat. She loses you very easily and can almost be annoying at times rather than pants-shittingly terrifying.
You've escaped!
But after that rude interruption from our new stalker Dolores, we finally come to La Perla Accolta with another cool puzzle in store for us, and yet another cool building. We need to identify who has which room to progress, going from room to room and finding evidence of each resident, putting their names in the door puzzle, and horror-wise this section is fantastic. Stalking the halls looking for information, and there's that constant eerie noises that seem to be some places and not others, lots of pesky ambush opportunities, and I absolutely got jump scared by a cheeky statue through one of the peepholes. Therefore, after solving the puzzle of the games, we get our next medallion and a little more backstory into the horrors committed by Arroyo. But from backstory to the urge to go back, a great little horror section going from building to building in search of the mermaids. A great section that is basically pitch black and almost silent, making pushing through to Fortuna Esmeralda a tense experience. Therefore, once in the bowels of Fortuna Esmeralda, it's once again puzzle time. But this time, again, it's something new. Some good old-fashioned dominoes. Unfortunately, not the pizza kind, the board game kind, which gives us our third and final mermaid with a now clear path to Madame Espina. But because easy is overrated, upon finally entering her basement, it's time to confront a new enemy. A crawling, fast, demon-looking kind of thing. It makes the worst sound as it is quite fast and can take a few shots before it goes down. Try to exploit them where you can. The balancing act of health and ammo is put to great effect here, with fast and frantic enemies in those close quarters, making the shots really sting. They can become quite costly if you panic. But don't stress. 2 little bridges that need to be lowered and we get the fuck out of here. But after surviving all that, we finally find Madame Espina. Victorious, our hero Gabriel gets another call from Arroyo with the classic
Arroyo, are you still there?
Captain Escudero, sooner than I expected. Are you starting to doubt already?
My faith is stronger than you think, preacher.
bad guy antagonizing the hero chit-chat, and it's back to the Solari base for a rest and a rearm. But from gothic water world to an oppressive mining town, we come to the Ram district, with its owner Lorenzo being our next target. Now, one thing I did not expect from this very 1920s Lovecraftian adventure is running from a sniper.
Oi! You don't look like you're from round here, stranger!
Lorenzo is fairly dangerous too. You really need to go cover to cover to avoid his deadly gaze. Drawing from another horror classic, Lorenzo and his shady mining practices dug up something suspicious and possibly dangerous, which is both curious and a little concerning. But if you play this like Indiana Jones and search every nook and every cranny for secrets, the extra ammo and fire rate upgrades for your weapons can really hit the spot. Therefore, after we check our jacket for bullet holes, we come across the central fuse box for the whole industrial area, which requires several fuses to get all the doors you will need opened. But as for any good new area, it also comes with some new challenges in the form of these flying evil Cupid enemies. Small, Cupid-looking creatures that are having a really bad day and like to throw bolts at you. But for double trouble, to counteract the new threat, we get a new weapon, a survival horror staple in the bolt-action rifle.
Seems dangerous.
It starts out with a 3-shot magazine. It's pretty effective at long range like all good rifles are, but just like the shotgun, the reload looks damn painful. Therefore, with the new stuff to go with our new surroundings and making our way through the district, we get stories from ghosts of residents past about all the shady shit that has been going on at the mine. From horrible accidents to cover-ups, weak compensation for families who were hit with tragedy, Lorenzo's cruelty knows no bounds. The bloke has left random mines around the place as little motivators for his workers, or maybe as an insurance policy against what they've dug up, only time will tell. But from good times to bad, our slightly blind, mechanized friend Dolores is back to get in the way again, while we set some pumps to clear a fire, racing around the area, tripping mines and opening doors as we go. Times like these, Dolores is the most dangerous.
Is that you? Found you!
Because it is essential to take your time opening doors, otherwise say goodbye to 30% of your health. Therefore, after those garages have been opened, Dolores has been successfully dodged and the fight is out. We finally managed to track down the foreman. But now it's on to building B for the next part of the fuse puzzle. Therefore, after some time has passed, Gabriel and Meteor Dia come to get along quite well, settling their differences and working together properly. But to cut that nice moment of downtime short, we arrive at building B, which is a horror show. A meatpacking plant with some damn spooky, ominous red lighting and bodies just everywhere. Pretty much just your classic meatpacking plant shenanigans. But absorbing the next piece of the fuse puzzle is a little bit different here. This time around, keeping with the meaty packing theme, we need to get a piece of the remains of the boss of the meatpacking plant through several puzzle areas. Getting the meat from one side of the bay to the other, we're using levers and timing to get it on the correct path through the packing plant and onto the end. But going from creativity to chaos, the next puzzle on this journey to fuse together a path forward takes us underground and through the sewers. With a few good fights for our trouble, and the puzzle for this section requires a draining of the dam, get the body in here to get that last pesky fuse, and onto the mines to ruin Lorenzo's day. As we enter the mines, well, we'll have to talk about that one next time. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you for part 2 of Crisol Theater of Idols.